How has the sexual education, sexual knowledge world that you've been working in, how has that changed over the course of your career? How is it different today than when you first, as a 15-year-old started getting involved in learning about and talking about and
Yeah, so when I started in this field as a teenager, it was obviously very targeted to the prevention of HIV. Right? It was very focused on protection and testing, right? Which by the way, is still an important part of conversations in the world of sexuality education. Absolutely. I think in a really beautiful way, we focus, for those of us who teach sexuality education, and I am certainly one of many, and there are lots of people from a variety of backgrounds and perspectives who also do this really beautifully. That we talk more about, the different ways we identify ourselves. That before we talk about all of those like how-to stuff, there's this expansive vocabulary about identity and gender and expression and relationships that we can be talking about. When I teach, I often, if I'm hired by a school, I'll often tell them, you're never going to get me to just jump into talking about something like consent or healthy relationships without talking about the difference between sex and sexuality, assigned sex at birth, gender identity, gender roles, sexual orientation.
Do you get pushback on that in certain communities?
So admittedly, no. I have to say, I've been really, really lucky.
Okay. No, I mean, that's great that they're at least willing to hear you out. Like, okay, well, if these are the terms and conditions, fine, we'll sign up.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, granted, being in New York City does help.
We're in a bubble.
I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't. I did. Yeah. Yes, for sure. I did have, years ago, I had an experience where I taught this amazing sexuality education program at a single sex gender girls religious school who for 7 years, it was incredible. And then, a parent actually of a kid that I did not teach became infuriated and sort of called the level above the head of the school. So called the organization,
the donors,
and then went, and I disappeared. But I have to say that was one out of, hundreds and hundreds of experiences. But I've been incredibly lucky. And I think that part of that comes from developing, after years of education or teaching, a language to explain why these things are important and how they relate to everyone, regardless of what your political, religious affiliation may be. It's not about any of those things. These are issues that we deal with throughout our lives. And, if we're concerned about the health and well-being of future adults, then it starts now.
That is so wonderful. And that's why it is so important that people like you are doing this work, and you are spending the years and the time and building the relationships with people and understanding people and developing the languages to be able to explain this to people who, for them, it may be a completely foreign concept why this is important, but yet we still need to break through to people like that, because it is people and communities like that maybe need this kind of education and conversation more than anyone else. So that's so wonderful. It's so wonderful to hear that that's been your experience, and that you're going to continue doing that work and sharing your knowledge with people and coming on our show and doing it here. So we really appreciate that and your wonderful books.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I mean, it's a real privilege to be able to, have access to communities and provide them, be a direct source for information about sex and sexuality, and also being able to recognize that the question that you asked about how has sex ed changed. I mean, we didn't talk in expansive terms about gender and identity years ago, even 5 to 10 years ago.
Didn't even know how important it was then, though. You know what I mean? I feel like our own knowledge is just so rapidly expanding.
I mean, I think the people who were most affected by it knew how important it was, but the social construct at large didn't seem to know the conversation.
Right, and from an administrative perspective in schools and organizations, it would have been hard to get buy-in from people, but we recognize that there's a human rights element to all of this. And we can't, I mean, we should have never stuck our heads in the sand, but we should not do that. And mass media has changed too, right? I mean, regardless of whether you like RuPaul's Drag Race, the fact is that, identity and expression and gender roles are now in our mainstream vernacular. It is super cool to be working with elementary school students who can name every queen on, the latest season of RuPaul's Drag Race.
Amazing.
So
right?
Cute.
Because it's certainly not the education that I got. And I did not grow up in a conservative environment by any stretch of the imagination, but we just didn't have that mass media diversity available to us. And now they do.
So if, as one last question, I wanted to ask you if there's one way that you think, or maybe not one, but if you think there is a way that we could start fixing sex education in America, what steps do you think that we should the baseline steps that we should start with, and where we should go to start normalizing and fixing sex education to make it more expansive across
getting
the
closer
states?
to the experience that you're bringing to the table here in New York.
Right.
So I'm so glad you said not one thing, because you clearly know by now that I'm way too verbose and I can't possibly.
Yeah, not one thing at all. There's no one fix to
I'm
our
just
education system.
I mean, we've got all day.
So one of our biggest challenges as in the community in terms of school-based sex ed, we'll just start there, because I think that's where most young people are being impacted, either by crappy sex ed or non-existent sex ed, is that most parents and caregivers and guardians have actually no idea what their schools are doing. They think they know what they're doing, but they don't really know what the content is, what the agenda may or may not be, who's teaching, what their experience is in teaching. I mean, I would rather people have no sex ed than be taught by someone, who has no background in talking about sexuality and development with young people, because it could be so scarring to someone.
Or has never even had sex themselves. In some cases.
I mean, I always laugh when I tell people, I am not the gym teacher. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with a PE teacher teaching sex ed if they've been trained to teach sex ed.
Yes.
But sexuality educators know that we are in general a very underrated profession. People don't seem to care that much about us, even though we do a lot of really important work and on all different levels. So first step, know what's going on in your respective community. And parents and caregivers have a lot of power locally in terms of pushing school boards and agendas and making sure things get done. And also just pairing up with organizations and people in your communities who provide the best allyship. It is unconscionable to think that the laws pertaining to sex ed in this country are so batshit. We have states who we don't even have a universal law saying that sex ed has to be medically and factually accurate.
Right.
Which is,
you would think the baseline. You would think that would just be the baseline. Like me going into a history class and just lying, making up facts and saying, okay, that's your history. But equally as bad, it's about bodies, right? It's about bodies and identity, and now I'm going to lie about it. So we have that, which is a problem. And then of course there's no universal strategy for teaching sex ed, even though there are incredible organizations and lobbyists looking to provide comprehensive sexuality education across the board. But we still have programs that are fundamentally, abstinence only focused, super heterosexist, have these grotesque racist underpinnings to them, just homophobic, transphobic, the Absolutely.
work. So it's important that people figure out what's actually being taught, and then finding the organizations and the people in their communities who can help them fight the good fight.
Do you have examples of who those organizations would be?
Yeah. So off the top of my head, Advocates for Youth is an amazing organization. They are DC based. They have incredible youth activists, but they also have a lot of people working to help school boards, help empower students and parents to get the education that they need. So that's just one off the top of my head. And they have amazing resources on their on their websites. And they actually also have something called amaze.org, which is it's a site full of these amazing short form sex ed videos for people of all ages about, everything, including not just gender identity and healthy relationships and condoms, but virginity and what virginity is really about, what it means to have an abortion, emergency contraception, some really awesome videos.
That's
amazing.
Great.
Masturbation. And again, you could check them out. They can always supplement the information people are giving at home or at schools too.
If a parent wanted to just Google some generic terms to be able to find organizations like this in their local community, what terms should they be Googling?
So I would say Advocates for Youth would definitely be the first source, and to go from there, because there's a lot of information that will steer people to local areas. SIECUS is another one, SIECUS, which stands for the Sexuality, Information and Education Council of the United States.
Awesome.
And both of those sources have lots of information and strategies for how to get what you need out of your sex ed program.
Thanks for checking out this clip from our show.
To watch more clips or full episodes, click on our profile below.
If you want to stay up to date on all of our new episodes and videos, click subscribe.
And if you have any ideas for future guests or topics that you would like to see us cover on the show,
leave us a message in the comments or connect with us on any of our social media channels at Funtime Program.
Or on our website at funtimeprogram.com.
We'll see you in the next one.
Bye-bye.